Welcome to part 2 of episode 37. So this is 37.2 of Sim Sundays by Grid Finder. This is the Vesaro interview with Nevil, and like we said in the previous episode, it was a very long one. Tom missed 2 trains. Just such an interesting guy to talk to. Tom, what do we have in store for this second part?
It's really I honestly got so deep into this. I absolutely loved it. So as if you've listened to the first episode, you'll know that was all about Nevil's story, where he started, how he got into this. Now, the second part, we go really into Vesaro and V-Rig. Now, we were lucky enough to experience V-Rig at the Sim Racing Expo at Nuremberg, Chris, last year. And V-Rig is a more consumer-focused rig. It's expensive. It's definitely premium consumer. It's not the £400-500 level of a track racer, next level racer, play seat, etc. It's like £1,200 for their base model. So it is premium, but it's very, very different to anything else. And there's a really interesting conversation we have about open source web development and aluminium profiling being like the sim racing hardware equivalent. So listen out for that.
Interesting. Well, enjoy this second part of the Vesaro interview, and we'll see you on the other end.
Customers. So you're pivoting based on the fact that you're getting a higher end customer.
I was telling you about the customer. The first customer, big commercial customer.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that first year, things were definitely challenging, and as I was saying, we were built the whole business from nothing really, with no funding, no investors, and there was definitely some doubts in that first year of could we just come in as a late mover and make a successful business here? Who do I think I am really? Like, all these other companies were already, they built the market, not me, and then we. Just when my doubts were sort of starting to creep in a little bit, we had this, call from Sim Raceway, who was mentioned before, who built the game, and they wanted 11 simulators, and they needed them in time for Indianapolis 500. So all of a sudden, it was like, okay, we got to get serious now, and they were motion. Not all motion, I think 2 motion and a bunch of static rigs, and we had to build these rigs quick. So this was our first sort of commercial customer, which really kind of showed us this whole world of I was very adept to the world of commercial clients. I'd been doing it for a long time, so this was definitely more my world, actually, of speaking and dealing with corporations and not necessarily direct to consumer. So it was quite an easy thing for me to jump into and deliver to a commercial client and speak to them on their level and how they respond to the kind of demands that they had. And at the time, our unit was so small, it was 1,000 square foot unit, that to build the rigs, by the time we'd built all 11 rigs ready for collection, they didn't even fit in the unit. And we were crating them up outside, fingers crossed that it was nearly going to rain at one point, until the FedEx came to collect. So we were literally every little square foot of space. You couldn't even get in the unit because it was stacked from front to back.
That is a proper startup bootstrap story, isn't it?
It was completely. I couldn't even get to my desk to answer an email or something because it was all blocked in with crates. And obviously that was a success. We got it to the event on time. It was a high pressure sort of, had to get there for the Indianapolis 500, and they were all on display and the public were using them, and kind of it started from there in terms of the commercial customers. The professional racing driver base that we have definitely came with time as we developed, and we were able to sort of start offering a more professional solution, which was a bit hard back in the day when you're dealing with the kind of controls. There wasn't really direct drive on the market, so it was a challenge to offer a solution that would work for a professional racing driver.
you're almost ahead of your time in that sense, that your products were so high end, had the capability of dealing with so much, could be so bespoke, but actually at the end of it, the thing that you're actually touching is the G27. It's you were ahead of your time.
Yeah. The controls were definitely, in terms of creating a complete balanced experience. You've at that point we had the D-Box Gen 1 motion, which is can still hold itself to its own. It's incredible. And if we had access to big screens, you had these big visuals and really accurate physical motion, and then you had this quite weak control system and soft pedals. They were the weak point in the puzzle, without a doubt.
And at this point, this is an assumption on my part, but you must have been learning a hell of a lot, because at Theory 7 you had a desk, a load of people, and a computer, and now you've got like stuff. You've got a warehouse, you've got tools, you've got to store things, you've got to then have a logistics, you've got a supply chain of stuff coming in to build these rigs, and then your supply chain going out to your customers, be it commercial or B2C. How did you find that transition from the digital to physical?
I mean, although you say desk and a computer, one of the things that was quite unique about my digital media company was we had our own render farm. So we had a physical render farm with approx 30 computers, like 30 render nodes, and then a whole bunch of separate nodes, dual processors, quad processors, multiple air conditioning units to be able to cool the whole thing, because it was like a giant.
And you were quite involved in that design.
I built the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you've always so it's always been a big part of what you do.
Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of IT. I worked in. I never wanted to be in the IT world, but I kind of fell into IT. I worked at Deutsche Bank for a couple of years in the IT department, and I worked in. I did a lot of work on the Y2K, like working for loads of different companies, preparing for the end of the world, which is the big Y2K scare, which when it eventually ticked over, nothing happened. But huge amounts of money was spent on IT infrastructure at the time, and I did a lot of work on that, and networks and servers, and so I was doing a lot of work in the physical space, and that helped, obviously. So it wasn't just sitting at a computer using software. I was sort of used to building, dealing with physical hardware, and I, even back at university, I had a business building computers and selling them to students, just to pay my way.
That's interesting. There's a funny similarity there between yourself and Andre Eriksson, CEO of Asetek, because he started Asetek by selling cooling systems to his mates at university too.
Yep. Okay.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I started before I went to university. I was working for British Telecom as a part-time job before going to uni. We were pole testing, so we'd go and dig out the pole and test to see if it was rotten and blah blah blah. It was a cushy little job, summer job. And I was just talking to one of the other BT engineers, and I was involved with computers, and he was like, "Oh, can you build me a computer?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll build you a computer." I'd never built one before, and I found out that in London they had these computer markets, and you go to a market and you could buy all the components, and you'd literally queue up for the guy selling the RAM, and he'd be literally like testing the RAM chips, and you'd buy the RAM and you'd buy the hard drives. It was, I don't even know if these things exist anymore. It was very
cool.
I
hope they do.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I bought all
flea market for PCs.
Yeah, it was literally a flea market, and bought all the parts. It took me like 2 weeks to build this computer. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. They were quite tricky to build back then. Not now. Like computers are so easy, just plug and play. They were quite a challenge back then, and I had problems with it. I had to give him his money back in the end, but I got better. I improved, and my first year at university, I was going to the markets in London and buying components. There wasn't really online shopping back then, and putting these computers together and selling them to all the students and sort of paying my way through uni. I didn't have any help. I didn't have like rich parents or anything like that could help me, so I had to pay my own way basically, and that was the way I did it. It was a lot of fun. I had students knocking at my door and in my dorm room, can you build me a computer please, or they'd bring me something to fix and stuff. Yeah, it was an interesting time.
That is very cool.
So yeah, I mean, I guess it all started there, and yeah. But in answer to your question about sort of the move to dealing with warehouses and lots of physical staff and manufacturing and everything, yeah, that was a yeah. You went off completely though.
Oh yeah, I did just then. Yeah, because I clicked leave to then come back in. Oh yeah, I won't leave.
Yeah.
I won't leave. I won't leave when you're still talking.
If you ask me to sit in a room on my own and talk to myself about myself, that might be just going a step too far.
That would be like
I've got my limits.
Laziest podcast host ever. So here's a list of questions. Let me know when you're done. I'll be back in an hour.
Yeah, you're pushing it there, Tom. Oh dear. Okay, cool. So I'll carry on. I think I remember where I was at. So yeah, it was an interesting transition that definitely involved a lot of learning, but it wasn't something really that fazed me. It was just I just had to do these things. I had to learn these things. I wasn't really overwhelmed or daunted by it. In fact, at that point, I was really just thinking, I want to be the best in the industry, and I want this to be a big company, and nothing else really. I didn't, that was my goal. So I had to learn a lot. I had to, I did have a partner in those initial 6 months, but after that, I then had to learn how to, I was on my own, and I had to learn CAD. I had to learn CAD design. I already knew 3D modeling and animation, so it was quite an easy transition for me to learn CAD. But really, what CAD, the thing with CAD is everything has to be exact, because you're going to send it to a machine, and the machine is going to produce a part. Whereas in 3D, when you're producing it for visual, it doesn't really matter. You can stuff something into the side of something, and things can intersect. It doesn't matter as long as it looks right on screen. So that was quite a learning process. That things have to be insanely, obsessively perfect in CAD. I had to learn about manufacturing processes, like, well, how do I actually get this part that's from this machine and turn that into a physical object? How do I do that? Well, what are the machines that do that? And although I'd had some exposure to that at university on one of the courses, but the reality was that it was all to learn. Everything was to learn. And in those early days, I manufactured locally, working with local companies, which was a real challenge I found in England. It was, I think British manufacturing was definitely a shadow of its former self. And I knew at the time that if I wanted to produce high volume and to do it right, I needed to go overseas, which is what I did. And so those early years, we manufactured in China the metalwork, which ended up being far higher quality than the local companies, surprisingly. And I guess that moves on later. We can discuss about how we then took everything in house, and we manufacture everything in house now. But yeah, it was a interesting process, and from nothing, we actually started in a garage. The very first frame was welded up in a garage. The classic cliche story. I've got pictures and video of us literally welding a frame up in a garage, and before we got our first unit, and it kind of developed from there, really.
So, it's really, I find it really interesting that with every project you've had, it seems that you've always started from the detail and worked outwards. Like you could do. It sounds to me like you could do pretty much every process that's required in a product. So you're saying there that you're welding as well as CAD designing, as well as probably building the website that sells the things. Like
I did.
It's kind of a very holistic approach for a founder to take.
I think, I mean, there's two ways you can start a business. One, you you have an idea and you have the ability to drive an idea, and you know what needs to be done in order to make it happen, and you get funding to then make that happen. You get investors, or it's not very easy in England to get any decent amount of bank funding. So not like America, where there's much better opportunity to get investment, or you have all the skills yourself, or you learn all the skills yourself and you do it yourself. So if I'd had not had those skill sets, or been willing to learn those skill sets, I would have needed investment in order to pay for the website to be built. Our original website had a full 3D configurator, that all that 3D modeling needed doing, all the photography, all of the graphic design, all of the CAD design, and building prototypes. All of those elements would have needed teams of people to be hired, or external companies to be hired, which would have taken a lot of investment. I had that skill set. I had all of those skills, and the ones I didn't, I learned. And what it resulted in was we, developed Vesaro without needing any investors, or big loans or anything. So, and then we've carried the business on like that to this day. So we still don't have any investors, 100% owned, and no debt. So we're very strong position as a company.
But how hands-on are you now? Because if you were still doing the website and the 3D designs and the animation and obviously the welding, like, you'd be burnt out. There's far too much to do. So how did you progress into kind of getting to a role where you're kind of overseeing, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, so the way we built the company was everyone we hire is a technician. Generally, everyone we have hired for it's changing a little bit now. We're actually doing a massive recruitment drive of 20 new. We're going to be hiring 20 new people in the next probably 2 months, and it's a little bit of a different strategy. But for the last 11 years, our strategy has always been hire technicians. You come in as a technician, someone willing to learn it from the ground up, how to build simulators. And some of those people would have they'd have things that they did in their spare time, or they'd have skills on the side. And we'd recognize that. And at some point there may be an opportunity for them to develop that skill.
Right.
Whether it was someone who, had a YouTube channel on the side, or, played around with video editing, or, liked playing with 3D, or was playing with CAD, or even doing electronics in their spare time. All of those things I just said, we've got a guy that started as a technician and had those things on the side.
Yeah.
And eventually they became, as the company grew, there became a position for them to grow into those positions. So we never went out and hired an electronics engineer who, was coming in completely fresh to our company and knew nothing about the product. We never went out and hired a video production guy or a CAD guy. They all came from technicians. So we now have dedicated video media production in-house, who's also doing 3D. I'm teaching all these skills down. We have dedicated CAD engineering team, all from technicians, a dedicated electronics engineer who was, again, originally a technician. And the list goes on, really. Even our sales team are originally technicians. We have a dedicated social media team, who are all technicians. So
that's nuts.
Everyone, yeah, it's great. We've got this amazing team that is what you actually need to be able to deliver the level of product that we need. You can't just hire people in who it's you could to a degree, but I think what we've done is stronger. Everyone knows how to build simulators, and sometimes it becomes super useful. Like, some crazy project will come along that there's no avoiding the timing on it. Saudi Aramco, we had to build a whole bunch of simulators in time for the Jeddah F1 race, and we either turn the project down, or we say, yeah, we'll do it and we'll make it happen. And to make it happen, it meant a whole bunch of people jumping in from social media, from sales, from CAD, from video production departments. They all jumped in, and they all knew how to build simulators because they've been doing it for years. They'd all had several years worth of time building the sims, and even going out and doing customer installs. So they were able to even jump in and help out if we needed to go and set them up. Because the big the Saudi Arabia event we had like 4 events happening all at the same time for a whole month in Saudi Arabia, and then at the Jeddah Grand Prix at the end. So it took like half of our company, and it's a kind of a really amazing resource. So we've developed that going forward, because actually, if we just hire people in to do a specific role, they miss out on all of that. They miss out on all of those years worth of experience, and also don't have that tool set in them if we need them to jump in and help out.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
There's a parallel there with a bizarre parallel, to be honest, with like my former life in the Navy. They had this concept which was sailor first. So it didn't matter if you were an electrical engineer, a weapons engineer, a chef,
right,
a medic, a logistics officer, or like me, I was a bridge officer, so driving the ship. You were all sailors first, because at your very core, you all had to be able to go out onto the upper deck, tie a bowline, and help with a man overboard or bringing the ship alongside. You all had to have that core set of skills and experience, and then you'd kind of, you'd branch off. But it was that sailor first concept, which is kind of exactly the same as what you've built.
That's amazing, and I never even heard of that. I mean, I don't know nothing about the Navy. Now I'm just going to have to be careful when I speak about this in the future to not use the Navy as a reference, as if it's something that was ever part of my strategy, because it definitely wasn't. But
it makes total sense, though, because then everybody has this shared experience, and it also brings the team a lot closer together, because you look at the person next to you, and although they might be doing a different job, you can relate to them more, because in your case, you all know how to build a simulator. And how often do you get in the factory building simulators? If you get a big job come in, do you log off and head to the factory and build?
No, I don't. There's never that time, because if things were mega busy, there would still be things that would need me, that would be a priority.
I bet you'd like to, though.
Oh yeah, I would love to. When I do get my hands dirty, I normally choose to do sweeping up. I know that might sound a bit strange, but if there's an opportunity, we're preparing for a big visit or something, and I'm sort of mucking in and telling people, put this here, tidy this up, I'll grab a broom if I see one, and I'll sweep up, because it's such a simple thing that when your mind and your day is filled with such complexity, that sweeping up is very satisfying. In that moment, it's a strange thing, and the guys probably think, oh, he thinks he's helping out and stuff, but it's a slightly selfish thing for me, but it's quite satisfying.
It's like a bit of self-care.
I mean, look, I think where I get involved is I'll tend to be walking around and helping the guys and showing them things that need needs improving, or giving them some tips and stuff. We're a big team now, so there's enough people in the company that it doesn't need me to be building simulators. But I would love to have the time to build one, but I've got a really great management team now that can do it better than me, and that's key. And that's what I want. I want people who can do these tasks better than me, and that's always my goal, is to employ people and then train them up and then watch them excel past me to the point where they probably wouldn't want me messing around with the simulator right now, because there's aspects of it that are have gone past me, because I'm not I'm not involved in the intricate wiring details and where something is channeled through the simulator. I'm not doing that on a daily basis. So
it sounds like an incredibly empowering place to work. It sounds like you give people a lot of free reign to build their own.
A lot.
areas of responsibility within the company.
Absolutely.
Almost organically, it sounds.
Completely. And we always say to people, when in the interview process, essentially you can create your own opportunity, create your own career, and you can find it. It's one thing you'll find with very big corporations is that when people come into a company, they're very much probably coming into a very specific defined role
with a ladder to follow.
Yeah, and the ladder might be quite defined and quite hard to move around. And that's not really the case of Vesaro. If you see something that is something you're interested in, there's the opportunity to move into it, or even create your own career and create your own job that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, I was about to say, it sounds like you encourage entrepreneurship quite.
I mean, I'll be honest, I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
No, I know. I just looked down at the time then. I can't believe it, because this has been an hour and a half, and I feel like I could keep going for another hour.
Yeah, like
to make this a two-parter.
Whatever. I'm happy to go as long as you want. It's not a problem. The whole day is dedicated to you, so.
That's very kind.
Go until you're done with me, or until I tell you that my blood pressure's raised too much and I need to quit.
I know my blood pressure is going through the roof because I feel so privileged to have this time, and the computer has chosen today of all days to keep turning the camera off, which I know is incredibly frustrating. But we'll battle through. So apologies for that.
That's fine. Did we round up with what we were talking about?
We did. It was it was perfect. We talked about entrepreneurship. Okay, so so we spoke about Saudi Aramco, and that was a huge gig that's kind of probably defined the kind of like the later years of Vesaro. And you had the F1 arcade, which was 60 rigs, and now another 60 in Birmingham. Plus, you're talking about the US. And I know they've got plans for 50 centers between now and 2025.
We've actually already started on Chicago, which is
wow,
over 70 rigs. So we're actually doing that at the same time as Birmingham. So we're building over 120 simulators at the moment for F1 Arcade, which is a pretty major undertaking, which is obviously fueling part of our expansion. So
yeah, but so I suppose my point was that you've kind of dominated this higher end of the market, this very kind of bespoke rigs for, say, racing drivers, and then your B2B arm, so sim racing centers that want 10, 20 or 70 rigs in a single place. But you've recently, I was about to say announced V-Rig, but actually V-Rig's been going for a little while. I suppose you've just kind of acknowledged V-Rig as part of the Vesaro family. What was take us back to when that started? Was that a product of your kind of entrepreneurial setup at Vesaro? And why was it kind of not hidden, I suppose, but you didn't announce it as a Vesaro brand straight away?
Yeah. So V-Rig, I guess, has been bubbling and in my head for as long as I can remember, probably going back 5-6 years, maybe even longer, because I think at the moment when Vesaro started to move towards, our very much our clientele is high net worth, professional racing drivers, commercial entertainment, commercial businesses. And as soon as we became very much embedded in those, and with that as our client base, V-Rig was being born in my head. It wasn't called V-Rig, but I always knew that I wanted to continue to serve the sim racing community and the more affordable end of the market. I didn't want to just become to only ever be serving big commercial businesses and high net worth clients. So it was born in that straight away, but it was always like in my mind working on it, how I could make it work and what kind of design it would be. And then it was developed over the course of a year, the product, and then we launched it. I made the decision to launch it during the first lockdown of the pandemic, and it proved very challenging, very challenging. We were launching a sort of a mass market product, self-assembly, and then the shipping crisis hit, and then the steel prices went through the roof because of the the demands and everything that was happening, which made it very difficult to launch a mass market product in that way, where the price of shipping is so important. Less so for Vesaro customers, the budgets are much higher, and the price of steel has a massive impact. And again, less so for a Vesaro simulator. The cost of the steel, it doesn't play a big part in the
different
overall
margins.
Yeah, it doesn't play an overall part in the end cost. Not necessarily that it's different margins. It's more just the overall budget that you're working with for a customer. And so that had quite a big impact on V-Rig, but it was okay because V-Rig was something that was kind of had always existed in my mind. It was always going to happen, and when it was going to happen, it would happen with the support of Vesaro, and it didn't need to hit the ground and if it didn't have instant sales, we would go out of business like a lot of new startups was. It was like having a child. It had a good parent that was going to look after it and bring it up and give it the opportunity to find its own way. And that's what we also wanted to do when we branded V-Rig, is it needed to sit on its own and speak its own language and speak to the right type of people. And because Vesaro doesn't speak to the sim racing community in the same way as V-Rig can, it's a different type of conversation. It's a different type of discussion with customers, and it just made sense to have it as a separate brand. And we also then made the decision to kind of kick it out into the world completely on its own, with 0 followers, 0 social media, and to not pump it from Vesaro. I mean, I think we've got like 250,000 followers on TikTok and 170,000 followers on Instagram, which I think is quite big for our industry. But we made the decision to kind of let it just be its own thing, which was kind of quite a good. It was a way to sort of to gain research in terms of the interest into the product. So again, we were in a position where we could just take our time with it and just see what happened, see what the feedback was in it on its own, without anyone, without it just being fed from Vesaro. So we then made the decision when Sim Expo came that we wanted both companies there. And how do you do that without one sort of knowing the other? Have two
just
spaces.
give each other sly looks across the hall.
Exactly. And like, do I run between the two and give interviews at one and then put a moustache on and a hat to interview at the other booth? So it was like, okay, this is a great opportunity to just let people know that V-Rig is a creation of Vesaro, and it didn't mean anything needed to change. V-Rig will still continue to just develop itself on its own, but yeah, we sort of announced it at that point. What we made a decision to do with V-Rig as well is, for the time being, we've got the products are just turnkey systems, just a lot more affordable than Vesaro. They kind of fill that gap between sort of £0 and £12,000. But our plan is still to have self-assembly kits that you can build yourself and bring that cost down even more. So that is something we are working on, and we're working on the manufacturing and making sure that when that's in place, it's at the right price that it needs to be. So that is coming in the near future.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the V-Rig is definitely, I don't know what bracket you put this in, but perhaps premium affordable. It's not £300 or £400. It doesn't seem like you're competing with, say, like GT Omega or Next Level Racing. It's more, well, perhaps Next Level Racing's like premium model, and Track Racer's premium model. Perhaps you're competing, but even then, I think it's £1,200 for the basic V-Rig with no screen, etc. So you're definitely going for premium quality. But what I liked is, you look at V-Rig and you're like, hey, this is our foray into the consumer market, but it doesn't look like anything else that you see in the consumer market. So for a start, it's not aluminium profile. It also doesn't look like Vesaro. It hasn't got that classic Vesaro curve at the front. And then it's also got this like huge USP that no one else has done other than play seat, but place and play seats like imitates, if you like, where you can fold the thing up and put it away in a cupboard, and it's got quite a small floor space. So again, it's right, we're going to go into this very, very crowded consumer market, but using a blank piece of paper. But you've aimed for the premium end of that market.
And I guess that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, in that we don't look at what everyone else is doing, and if we had, we would have ended up launching a product that was an aluminium profile rig like everyone else. It's literally what's come out of my mind and sitting with my engineers, and we're playing with ideas and we're sketching. We sit on the floor around the prototypes and we're coming up with just what is in our minds, what we want to do, with ideas based on stuff that we've learned and what's in front of us. We've not got a whole bunch of other competing products in our dev lab and trying to copy ideas. It's just not how we work. And the result of that is great, because what you're saying is our intention is for it to not look like everything else, and for it to have innovative ideas that other people aren't doing. To touch on one thing though, you said about where we seem to be targeting, but we definitely are planning to have an even more affordable product, which will start to bring us into those sort of competing with those other companies. But it will be V-Rig grade strength, because that's the thing with the V-Rig. I don't know if you managed to get a go on it at Sim Expo, but it's all very chunky and very strong, but like super flexible at the same time. So when we do a more affordable product, it will probably be like a more stripped back version of the S1, and we'll be aiming at that more affordable price point, because ultimately we want we definitely want that bigger piece of the market. It's a tough place to play though. You've got companies like Track Racer and RC that are way ahead of the game there. But what we're not interested in doing is trying to play a catch-up game. So we're not going in thinking, oh, we've got to really catch up with Track Racer or Playseat or anything like that. Because if we try and do that, then that means we've got to try and imitate what they're doing in some way in order to catch up. And that's not how I think. We'll do our thing and we'll do it the way we want to do it. And hopefully that will lead to success in V-Rig on its own right, not because we're trying to play catch up to another company.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I'm intrigued to see what you come up with for that space with V-Rig. It's going to be very interesting to truly enter that kind of like £350 to £700 market that's got so many options. And there are some that are slightly different, and there are some designs that haven't gone with aluminium profile. So it'll be really interesting to see what you come up with. And I suppose that you've answered my next question, which was, where do you go from here? You do B2B big sim centers, you do high net worth individuals. Now you've gone for the premium end consumer, and now it sounds like you're going for the average consumer. That'll mean you're covering the whole market, right?
Yeah, and
then what?
And that was always the plan from day one. Like, actually, day one of Vesaro, I'd said to myself, I want to have a product that covers the whole market, which was where the modular design kind of came in. Because the idea is, if you've got a modular design, you can just reconfigure from the low end right up to the high end, and that worked to a degree. But what we found was at the low end that, if you try and have one company service the entire range, it doesn't work, because you're literally having a conversation with Formula One on one call, and the next thing someone is looking to buy the rig for as a birthday present for their son, and both customers are just as important as the other. But it's very, it's very difficult. Like, I was able to switch the hat very quickly, but it's not as easy to then build a company and expand it that has that type of such a massive difference in the customer and the type of conversation you're having, and the demands of the different types of customers. So that's where it makes sense for V-Rig to kind of be able to have its own language and own understanding of its customers. So
interesting. So, you must, since the advent of V-Rig, and actually probably, let's be honest, right from the beginning of Vesaro, you've been studying the sim racing space, and you've been studying, the even the publishers that are coming out with new games. You must have had some thoughts around the ESL R1 series that's just started. What's your take on their impact on sim racing and how that's going to affect our market?
So like esports sim racing. I mean, it's the esports like industry. We've kind of been sort of holding a bit back from it, and we've not really been delving too much into it, because up to now, really the industry has, it's mainly been supported by companies looking to just give 20 rigs basic setups, because there wasn't the money in the industry to be able to fund anything more. So the standard has been kind of set as, well, whichever company can afford to give a bunch of play seats with Thrustmaster wheels attached or something like that. And that's not really been of interest to us. So we've just kind of been, staying really away from the industry to a degree and waiting for it to mature. The pandemic obviously saw quite a big push in that, and a lot of money going into the industry, because really, from our point of view, it's like if we're going to get involved in esports of any kind, it's got to, there's a certain standard that we think it should be, and you can't do that just based on, well, how many rigs can they afford to give away for free to put in this arena. That's not what it should be about. It should be a certain standard that races are racing on. Absolute minimum. It should have, motion and direct drive and, proper visual setup and sound and stuff. It should be a physical.
Interesting that you said motion.
Oh,
sorry
absolutely.
to cut in. Interesting you say motion. So do you think motion has a place in esports level sim racing?
How could it not be considered? I mean, like,
well,
absolutely.
It hasn't been up to now, right? I think a lot of.
But that's my point, and that's why. Yeah. And that's why we've kind of avoided it, because there isn't the money. There hasn't been the money in it. All there's been.
But do you think it's about the money, or do you think it's about
up to this point,
sim racers? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think like absolutely. Why wouldn't, like, it's like a loop, and the loop. The circle has all of the elements in it to recreate what you experience in real life. So you've got your visual senses, your audio senses, your, in a real car, your body would be moving up and down. You'd have vibration. And actually, if you don't have the motion, your loop is open. It's not a closed loop system. And, yes, you can get away with it. Yes, maybe you can drive just as fast. Some people might argue, but that's not the point in my mind. It's about recreating the real experience physically, and although they are their own entities, like sim racing is an entity in its own right, it shouldn't just be a path to racing. We absolutely don't think that, like, you can have a path to become a sim racer and that's your career. Not everyone wants to get in a race car and put their lives at risk. I personally don't. I've got a family and a daughter. I don't want to do things that dangerous. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I absolutely see them as, different entities, but I also see them as having this merge where you would absolutely want to recreate as much as possible the what you're recreating digitally in the software. So if you remove an element of that, then you're training or driving or racing on a loop that is open. It's not closed. And not to mention, now with VR, having motion reduces nausea anyway. So there's if you're doing esports with VR, massive benefit to it in that respect.
It's interesting because there's definitely a debate to be had here, because some people will say that adding motion, yes, adds to realism, great, and it also probably adds to the spectacle of an esports event, seeing all the drivers kind of moving around. But what it won't help with is accessibility. So if you watch CSGO or Dota or Call of Duty, the people that you're watching are using the same keyboard and mouse or the same controller that you have access to at home because it's 40, 50 pounds to buy. If sim racing goes down a route where the rigs that they're using in esports are all 5, 10, 15, 20,000 pounds, euros each, then all of a sudden sim racing as an esport, as a spectacle, is now even less accessible than it already is, in terms of, a lot of the time they're using Fanatec or SimuCube, which immediately rules out a huge portion of the fan base in terms of them being able to feel a part of it and to be able to do exactly the same things. Do you see what I mean? In terms of CSGO, for example, all you need is a keyboard and mouse and you can have exactly the same experience as the guys on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could compare that though to, like, now it's standard for racing drivers to train on a simulator, and they'll put far more hours into their training on a simulator in a digital experience. But when it comes to the arena, your esports arena, and you come to actually race, and when you actually come to the track, you're doing it for real in a real race car, and it's a physical experience. But the majority of their actual preparation for that day is not in a race car.
Yeah,
it's not the real thing. So what's the difference for, in terms of accessibility? It's really, you can train at home on a keyboard, with a gamepad if you want, as the absolute lowest possible training value. But as a basic setup with a Logitech and a static rig, or something you made out of wood, whatever, you can still train and prepare for that, for the arena event. The arena event is your day at the racetrack, where you all get in your £1 million race cars that need a whole team of people to run it. And in the esports arena, you've got a massive team of people running all of the audio and the complexities of the live stream. It's a big operation, and that's
a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I see it. And it doesn't mean that it can't be done. It doesn't mean you can't have esports with 20 static rigs with affordable controls, and because that's what's currently has been driving it up to this point. But my personal interests and where we've seen ourselves being excited about getting involved is when the industry is being ready for that type of experience that we see as being essential. So for racing drivers, for professional racing drivers, everyone who comes to us, every professional racing driver that comes to us and tests our equipment, 90% of them see the value and the improvement in the motion, and they report back on how they can get within 0.2 of a second within the real race car on the track, on the simulator. So we know what is valuable in terms of hardware and in terms of equipment, and that's where we see esports going, and where it should be. It should be that higher end level of equipment, and it should be a physical experience. Like, esports stars should be sportsmen, in my opinion, to a degree. It's never they're not gonna have to deal with the kind of G forces that Lewis Hamilton has to experience. It doesn't have to be that physical experience, but it's more of a physical experience than just sitting with a very low powered Logitech steering wheel, which is the popular argument that, well, I can be as fast as you on your £20,000 rig on my Logitech type thing. But and that may be the case, but should that be the standard that is set? F1 could say, well, our standard doesn't have to be these highly strung 200-mile-an-hour cars. It could be this standard. But no, that's what they've set as the standard. This is the level of car that you need to build to enter into F1. And this is the type of physical experience that the drivers are going to have to endure in order to race at this level. And it's a very very physical experience if you want to be at the top of the game. I think that the simulation experience should be the same. Maybe it will be in the higher levels of esports and higher levels of racing. Maybe you work your way up to the higher levels where you are driving in equipment that is far more demanding on your body, because that doesn't really exist right now. There is no standards. It's
progression.
There's no standards. There's no progression. If you look at the progression in real racing, you're starting off in a go-kart that we can all just go and jump in and experience ourselves on the weekend. It's very easy to access, and then it works up from there. It gets harder and harder. It's a very gradual progression to the point where a Formula One car is extremely difficult to drive with such high G forces that you have to be, physically fit and physically trained to be able to handle those forces on your body, and that doesn't exist in esports. And I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it exist. And then
that's a very, very interesting take. Very interesting take. And actually, I was definitely going into that question. I was thinking, well, no, you want it to be accessible so that people that are watching at home on Twitch could stop watching and then go and do something which is similar. If it's the more different it is, the less they can relate to it. But actually, I'm a huge F1 fan and cannot relate to driving an F1 car, sadly.
Yeah.
But I still enjoy it. So it's a really interesting take.
But it's accessible. F1 is accessible in to a degree. We can all jump on the game and we can drive it and it's accessible. But competing at the world-class level in esports, where you are the top racers in the world, should it be as easy as just sitting on your couch with a controller, or should it be have more similarities to real world motorsport, where I'm not saying how it should be or that I'm right, or it's just what I personally feel and how we think it would be a good way to have the industry evolve and develop, and then we would
very interesting
become more heavily involved in that. And then I think there maybe V-Rig could fit quite nicely into the more entry level systems, more affordable, where an esports company could invest more easily in 20 V-Rigs, for example, and you are working your way up to when you're playing in the higher levels, the F1 equivalent, you're on a 50,000-60,000 pound simulator that's got the highest level of motion and G-force seatbelt systems that is going to be pulling on you and exerting force on your body. It can go as extreme as you want. I would probably say it would be a VR experience to be as fully immersive as possible.
So VR, do you think VR is the most immersive experience then? The VR versus triples.
Absolutely. I mean, we've just launched triple 55-inch Samsung Arc display setup. I think we were the world's first to do that, and that's about as close as you can get in terms of immersive without putting a headset on, because there's a massive demand for non-VR solutions, and the majority of our clients, they don't want VR. It's just a step too far, really, having to have a headset on, especially when they're looking to train for a long time.
And I don't think the tech has caught up enough yet. I think the refresh rates and the clarity that is missing slightly. Like even the most expensive VR headsets, I feel like they're not quite there yet. And you got to pair them with a hell of a GPU to make it a properly immersive experience. But I feel like 2023 might be the year that gap is bridged.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, Vesaro Aero, when that came out, was the biggest. That was a bit of a, because up to then it was like we would really have to. There was a massive compromise when you're demoing it. It's like you can't really see onto the apex clearly, and like you're using VR, you've got the massive benefit of the extra immersion, but there was that compromise, and the Vesaro Aero has definitely like closed that gap massively. It's a lot more crisp, and you can see really clearly into the apex. So we're definitely getting there now, and we can confidently recommend VR now without having to add those caveats and
so you can now confidently recommend
project.
VR to your clients without it being like look, try VR,
Yeah.
but just be aware that X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly. So we're confidently recommending it now as a viable solution. The only caveat that still is there is the nausea aspect, and that's just it either affects you or it doesn't, and so that's still a factor. And some customers they absolutely just want whatever is the best, and they're willing to even train themselves out of the nausea, which is possible. Yeah, it's not probably something I wouldn't do, but I'm lucky it doesn't affect me, surprisingly, because I'm not great on a boat that's bobbing around. It will make me sick and stuff. So I was surprised that I got away with the VR. Even, we started with the very first Oculus development kits, and I was absolutely fine with it. So, which is why we got behind it, really. If it didn't work for me, I probably would have struggled to get behind it. It would be difficult
to have passion for
it. Yeah, exactly. And you have to. I've got to have passion for everything we do, and if I want to get behind it and invest time, resources, and money into it.
Nevil, thank you so much for your time. I've got one more question, and I like to ask this to people like yourself who are kind of at the forefront of what they're doing in sim racing, right? And this is a really unfair question, right? I'm not going to lie. This is a really unfair question, but put yourself 5 years from now.
Go on, hit me.
Right, 5 years from now, what are the biggest differences you see in A, sim racing, and B, Vesaro?
So, A, sim racing. Okay, let's start with that. The biggest differences, firstly, like just AI just popped into my head. Like, what's AI going to do to this to sim racing? Because I'm like heavily into AI right now, creating AI art, and I've been doing a lot of it in my as a sort of spare time hobby, and the technology and the tools are just unbelievable. Like, every day there's some new tool. Like, how's that going to impact sim racing? Because it's going to impact every single industry. Obviously, we've had AI in of sorts in racing for a long time. The cars can sort of work out that you're coming up behind them and respond, and but this is a whole nother level what we're facing this year, and it's all really just happening. So 5 years of AI, what's that going to do to the industry in terms of software and possibly even hardware? I don't know whether it will start to affect the hardware. It could even affect how we manufacture, and there's a massive unknown, really, of what could that do. I'm quite excited to see how AI could affect this industry and for the benefit of everyone in it. So aside from that, esports is obviously growing. That's an obvious one. I'd love to see it being a bigger industry with a lot more sort of money in it to support the teams and allow more people to get into the industry. And in terms of hardware, that's obviously changing since the pandemic. There's lots of companies that are already very established in other industries that have seen a big opportunity in this industry, which is great. So companies like Acetec and Moza Racing, which are already a very a big established company, have come in and are really adding massive value to the industry. And I think we're going to see more of that. So having some really big players, big already established players coming in and developing products really fast is great, because up to now it's been a lot of companies starting from scratch and just slowly building up and developing products over time, which takes a long time. It's been quite a slow progress over the last 10 years, and in the last year or two, look at what Moza Racing have done in the last year, but that's because they weren't starting from nothing. They've already had a huge portfolio of products in the camera and gimbal market. They already know what they're doing, so they've been able to really accelerate. They've done what took Fanatec a decade to do. They've nearly caught up with them if not already overtaking them in a year. It's amazing, and that needed big established companies to look at our little industry and to jump into it. Like, Acetec is another example of an existing company in another space sort of coming in. So I think it's going to accelerate the industry, and in 5 years' time, we'll see what the result of that is with other companies.
It's a great indicator, isn't it, for sim racing when you see all these huge companies. Like Acetec, I always use Acetec as a case study, that they were the leaders in their field for cooling systems, and they get the gaming market. They do cooling systems for gaming PCs and liquid cooling. Like, they know gamers, and they know hardware, and they've decided to enter one more market. They've been doing cooling systems for 15 years, and then the only other market they've tried, or that they've entered, is sim racing. It's kind of it's a good sign. And I always think, if you look at other esports sectors of esports, they must look at sim racing with a huge amount of envy, because I always say this, but there's only so many ways you can upgrade a keyboard and mouse or a controller, whereas with a sim rig, there's endless ways of upgrading. No one's ever finished. There's always something to add to it.
Yeah, which is why I'm still doing it now, and I'm still as passionate as I was 11 years ago, because it's literally endless. There's so many possibilities, and we've got loads of things in the pipeline that are pretty exciting. We've got loads of products in development. In 5 years' time, those products will be out. At the moment, we're not. Yeah, at the moment, we're not sort of we're not really looking at developing our own wheelbases, or or pedals or things like that. I think that would just be too much of a distraction at the moment. We're going to continue focusing on developing the hardware out and integrating the best components, not reinventing the wheel literally, because there's so much to do. There's so much to do just doing that, and where we've now started to really, we're now able to do the full fiberglass body shells as well, which kind of, for our type of customer and the commercial market and entertainment, theme parks and arcades and things like that, is a really crucial element. They wouldn't look twice at an aluminium profile rig, and even our bare frame, which has got far more curves, is not good enough.
Needs to look tidy.
They want to see things that mimic an aeroplane with a body shell, or a racing car. It's got to have that finished look. So they're skills that we developed over the last few years, to the not just the separate individual Formula One shaped cars, but taking those that concept and applying it to our existing frames, which is a trickier thing to do. And now that we've got that, we've got a lot of things in the pipeline. We're also speaking to, I guess this moves on to Vesaro, where Vesaro is going to be. So I'm not a great future planner. It's not. My future plans tend to be more bold visions. Like, I want to lead this space, or I want to. They don't tend to be as.
You kind of know the destination, but you haven't planned the route.
Yeah, because I like my route to be really flexible, and I like to be able to pivot on a daily basis and let my ideas just. If an idea comes in, I don't have to park that idea.
Because you've already got a roadmap
forever,
for
because I've
12
got
months,
such a
whatever.
strict.
Yeah,
I've got such a strict. Yeah, exactly. I prefer to be a bit more flexible, but we are currently in talks with a major supercar manufacturer, and I'm really excited about, because we've done it in the past. We did a license with McLaren, but back then we didn't have the skills we have now. We built a really nice range of simulators for McLaren. We integrated the McLaren seat and the steering wheel, fully electric, seat straight out of the cars. We didn't have the skills to integrate a sort of the fiberglass body shell, which is what we kind of need for that type of really bespoke branded product. A few years later, we've now done it for F1 Arcade. We've got a really slick integrated body shell on a compact chassis,
and they do look beautiful.
Yeah, it came out amazing because it's a different type of product to the full size Formula One cars we have. Like it's hard to take that and make it a a product that more people can buy and put in their home. And so we've been waiting, and we've had a lot of companies come to us, everyone from Ferrari to Mercedes, you name it. But we're waiting to decide and pick the one that's right for us. It's strangely we're in a good position where we get to pick which supercar company we want, and these are massive organizations.
That's a pretty nuts statement, that.
Yeah, it is, because there's not many people, like lots of people can build aluminium profile frames, and it's a very quick to enter the market and start building aluminium frames. It's a very quick entry into the market, and lots of companies have done that. But it's not a very easy thing to do what we do and to build something like the F1 arcade model, especially as a fully certified product. So yeah, I guess there's plenty of companies that will say that they can do it, but the reality of doing it and then building at volume is the next part of the challenge. I mean, we've currently got a 20,000 square foot facility. We've got our own metal factory, our own fiber laser machines, tube laser machines, brake presses, powder coat facility. We can manufacture in-house ourselves, and we're expanding. Currently, we're about to take on 20 more staff. So if anyone out there is looking to come and work for a sim company, we're accepting applications. So there's a big influx we're having at the moment, and we're taking on another 10,000 square foot of space. By a year from now, we'll be needing around 35 to 40,000 square foot facility, and we'll probably be up to around 60 staff at that point as well. So every year we're going to be sort of expanding quite significantly, and it's and you need all of that to be able to not only develop, design, and prototype a product, but then to be able to deliver that type of product on the requirements of a company that you're working with to license. So yeah, that's currently in talks, and if it happens, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. We've got a lot of other things to do, so that's pretty exciting, and hopefully you'll see that come in. And yeah, I guess 5 years from now, I don't know, but what I do know is what's happening now and what's in the pipeline. Lots of new products. I know what I would like, where I'd like us to be in 5 years is to be a much bigger company with a unified facility. We're currently, as we're expanding, we're spreading out. We're basically grabbing every unit we possibly can on our estate. We've now run out of space, and we're having to move to other units away from us, which is not a great way to scale the business. So in 5 years from now, I hope that we'll be in one large building and have everything under one roof, which would make our factory tours easier, because currently when a customer comes, the showroom is now separate. It's a 1 minute drive down the road to our main factory, and it just makes our visits a bit difficult. And we're about to take another building, which is in another place down another road, so we're going to have like 3 sites.
A sim racing empire.
Yeah, we're kind of taking over the estate, but that's not how we want it. It would, really, we want everything under one roof.
I would probably argue that, to be honest, this is a very minor problem to have, a very good problem to have. It's a symptom of a huge amount of success. So I think it's a perfectionist who would look at this and go, "Oh, it's a nightmare. It's not going as planned. We've got all this demand. We're selling all these units. We've got all these staff, and we've had to just get units all over the place. It's a nightmare. Actually, it doesn't take much of a step back to go, okay, this is a symptom of our incredible speed, our growth."
Yeah, it's hard to step back and look, and when we have clients visit us and they're like, they say, "Oh, you must be, you must just stop and look at this and be really proud of what you created." and you just don't get that. You don't have the time or the headspace, and also it's not really in my personality to sort of sit and
look. You don't have time to stop and look.
Yeah, you don't have time to stop and kind of look in awe and kind of like give yourself a pat on the back, really. And I guess like today is why today is so great. Like sitting and talking to you for 2 hours, minus the sort of technical interruptions that you've had, which is great.
I know.
Today it's been a great opportunity because it's an opportunity to look back to my past, to look back to like, why are we here now? Why am I here today? To, I guess, give yourself a bit of a pat on the back of what you've created, and to kind of sum it all up into this moment now. So it's really looking back at our history, and it's a super useful thing to do, to sit and talk with you, and hopefully the listeners will be interested and gain something from some of my waffle. I hope it hasn't been too much.
I feel incredibly privileged to have been the one to get to listen to this kind of recap of the last 10, 11 years of Vesaro, because I think your story is one that the rest of any other company in sim racing with their software, hardware, or in between can look at your story and take inspiration from it and think, right, you've gone from nothing to something, and that something is incredible. It's growing, it's fast, it's serving all markets within sim racing, and all of those indicators are positive. So anybody else in the industry can look at Vesaro and go, I can make, if there is a success to be made in this industry. Look how Vesaro has grown.
Absolutely, and that's all we want. We want lots of companies coming into the industry. We don't want to just be like, oh, this is our party, you can't come. The more companies that come in, the more competition there is, and as long as it's healthy competition, then I think that's great. And it's just, and we need lots of companies here. We can't do it all, like, and us and the other companies that serve the high end, and the companies serving the middle and the entry. Everyone's flat out. Like I'm sure if you spoke to most of the other companies, everyone is super busy. There's not enough. We can only scale so fast. So I welcome new people into the party, because there's a lot of simulators to make.
There's a lot of sim racers to make happy.
And it's just yeah. That's a challenging thing for sure. But yeah, I think the industry is going to keep growing, so it's exciting. It really is. It's been a sort of, the curve has kind of been like this. It's been very steady, and then it's now, I think we're here, we're at the elbow, and it's definitely accelerating for us as a company. We're having that growth, but I think the industry is also doing a similar thing.
I think so too. I feel incredibly lucky that this is my everyday, to be in this industry with people who are here for fun. They're here for the passion of it. Everybody I speak to, and I'm very lucky on this podcast because I get to speak to people who often do this full time. Some occasionally it's a streamer who do it in the evenings and weekends because they love it. But a lot of the time I speak to people who work in sim racing all day, every day, and it's such a great industry to work in. I think it's very easy to forget that very few people get to spend their 9 to 5 doing something that they truly, genuinely love in a sector which is essentially gaming. With maybe you've got probably got a few. Maybe you're an exception actually, because you have customers that are racing drivers who are doing it for their profession. But most of us are doing it for fun. Most of us are doing it to play games. Even if you're trying to get to the lower levels of esports, it's still for fun, which is an incredibly privileged life to lead. And I look at the success of Vesaro and feel incredibly confident in what we're doing. Obviously, seeing your growth is a good indicator that what we're doing at Gridfinder is gonna grow too. Nevil, we've been going 2.5 hours, and I can't thank you enough for.
What
it's been 2.5 hours, and I can't.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you so much for this time, telling us your story. Your story about your university days, I think, are absolutely fantastic. Selling computers to your mates, that is such a classic startup founder story. I've absolutely loved it. I'm gonna go back and listen to this, and this is probably going to be, it's definitely going to be our first 2-parter that we'll release as a special. And it's been fantastic. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for inviting me and letting me be a part of it. So I love.
You were saying something about how you love what us guys are doing.
I was to say there's a bit of a rude way to end the conversation. Exit.
Bye.
Bye. 2.5 hours. Bye. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. With I absolutely love what you guys are doing, and obviously met you at Sim Expo, and we did a few interviews there, and yeah, I think it's great. So I'm happy to come and support. And anytime you want to have a chat, as things change and develop on our side, then just give me a shout.
100% will do. This is definitely a journey that we'll endeavor to follow on the podcast. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you. Take care. See you later.
Well, wasn't that a long and great conversation? I really think the V-Rig idea that he's put together is a really good idea because, to be honest with you, Vesaro rigs were absolutely something that I want in sitting right here behind me, right?
But completely unobtainable.
Completely unobtainable. And with V-Rig coming to the market, I think that's just going to make it so that, Vesaro stuff is attainable for the average sim racer now.
Yeah. And I like that they haven't just been like, okay, Vesaro, we have a strong brand. We have this super, super, super premium range. And we're going to come in with like a consumer range, which is like all the other consumer ranges, but it's got the Vesaro badge on it.
Right.
Again, like he always does, started with a completely blank piece of paper. And actually, the rig looks good. The rig looks really good.
Does.
They've avoided the aluminum profile, but it still looks like bulky. It looks industrial. It's got some really nice angles at the front. I'm a fan.
Me too.
I expect it's the first of many iterations of that rig, and they've also they've gone straight in with like quite an obvious USP, which is the foldability of the design. So you can fold it away and put it in a cupboard. If you can use it in a spare room, you could put it away in the spare room cupboard, which is quite clever.
That's the major difference in my mind, is that you can put it away. Because a lot of these rigs, obviously, you basically have to have a dedicated area of your house or your flat or your apartment, whatever, in order to have it sitting out. So
unless
changing
you have
it up a little bit,
which is like 300 pounds, but then a play seat has the the column that comes up between your legs, and it's flimsy and blah 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 blah. So they've really, I like it. I like it a lot, and it's kind of nuts that they've got the V-Rig range, but then they've also got like the F1 arcade range, where they're looking like 40, 50, 60,000 pounds, euros, whatever, for these super bespoke monocoques and motion, and they've got a full range of stuff. And I was really interested hearing about how he's had to scale the footprint of the business in like physically, like geographically, like all those. He was saying how he's got like he had one warehouse, now a second warehouse, now looking for another warehouse. And he wants to put it all under one roof, but he's got like half of a trading estate right now, all working on rigs. After the episode, he actually invited me down to do a little bit of a tour, which we should definitely do.
We should definitely do that. So, well, hopefully you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. This episode, of course, just like all of our episodes, sponsored by Track Racer. So if you're looking to upgrade your rig, change out your rig, whatever, go to trackracer.com to do that. And then also we have Grid Finder. If you are someone who's just looking for a league, go to gridfinder.com, select your platform, your simulator, and even the day of week that you want to race. And we'll have thousands of just different options for you to join and get on some league racing, which is a lot of fun. Or, if you happen to be one of those league owners that needs a little bit of promotion, go ahead and list your league on Grid Finder and have thousands and thousands and thousands of drivers getting into your grid so you can fill those slots and have full grids for all of your races. Other than that, Tom, do you have any last things to share with the listeners and viewers?
Nope. Absolutely nothing. Just big thank you to Nevil for giving up so much time. I really enjoyed that chat, and we probably could have spoken for hours and hours and hours and hours, but you've got to cut it off somewhere. Otherwise, the next 3 months will just be Vesaro episodes.
Next time he has a product release, maybe we can get him on the show and even go visit and feature it in the YouTube and stuff like that. So we'll see what we can do there. Other than that, this was episode 37 of Sim Sundays. We appreciate you listening or watching, whichever you chose to do for this episode, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye.